It was a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary evening where the world feels steady, predictable, like a clock ticking in the background. I was 38, stirring leftover chicken casserole, the kitchen warm with the hum of a 65-degree spring night, when my husband Greg dropped a sentence that cracked my life open. Between bites, his fork scraping the plate, he said it. "Penelope, I've always had doubts. I think it's time for a DNA test for Matthew." The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass, and I laughed, thinking it was a joke. 15 years of raising our son, sleepless nights with colic, school projects glued together with love, ER visits for a broken arm, flashed before me. Doubts? What doubts? But Greg's jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on his plate, and my laughter died. I sat across from him, the casserole congealing, my heart thudding like a drum in a quiet room. "What do you mean by doubts?" I asked, my voice careful, as if stepping on thin ice. "I mean exactly what I said," he replied, his tone flat, like we were discussing a car repair. "I've had reasons, and it's time we know for sure." I stared at him, this man I met at 23, dependable if not romantic, who paid bills on time and mowed our suburban lawn every Sunday. Our life wasn't fireworks, but it was stable. Matthew came a year after our wedding, born in 2009 at St. Joseph's Memorial Hospital, 20 miles away. Greg was there, crying when he held our son, a rare crack in his stoic shell. I'd never seen him cry before, not even at his mother's funeral. And now this. That night I lay awake, the ceiling fan's rotations a metronome to my racing thoughts. Greg's steady breathing beside me felt like a betrayal, as if he hadn't just tossed a grenade into our lives. I didn't scream or demand answers. I just counted the fan's spins, each one a question. Why now? What reasons? Matthew, with Greg's cleft chin and stubborn scowl, was our son. How could he doubt that? 2 days later, we drove 10 miles to a clinic, the air thick with silence. Matthew, 15, asked why we needed a special doctor. Greg lied smoothly. Routine tests. I stayed quiet, my hands knotted in my lap, the technician's kind smile burning like pity. She swabbed Matthew's cheek, her gloves snapping in the sterile room, and I wondered what she saw in us. A fractured family, an unfaithful wife, a paranoid husband. The question lingered as we left, the spring sun too bright, the weight of Greg's words heavier than the casserole dish I'd scrubbed clean the night before. 15 years, and I thought we were a team. But as Greg's eyes avoided mine, I felt the ground shift beneath me, a crack I couldn't see but knew was there, waiting to swallow us whole. The 9 days that followed felt like wet wool draped across my shoulders, heavy, itching, suffocating. I waited for the DNA results, each hour a vice tightening around my chest. The suburban house we'd built our life in now a stranger's territory. Greg barely spoke, his presence a ghost in our home. He left early for work, his truck rumbling out of the driveway before dawn, and returned late, eating dinner without comment. No kisses goodbye, no goodnight pen. The air between us was cold, sterile, like strangers sharing a hospital waiting room on a 60-degree overcast morning. I watched him closely, the way he checked his phone in the garage, the way his laptop snapped shut when I entered the room. Once he'd shared everything. Boring spreadsheets, articles about deck repairs we'd never do. Now his world was locked away and I was on the outside, staring at a password-protected screen that mocked my trust. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Denise, my sister, who called every evening like clockwork. But on the 4th day, I cracked, my voice trembling as I told her over the phone. "He's always been insecure, Pen," she said, her tone sharp with memory. "Remember his ex and that piano teacher? He never trusted anyone, not even himself." I nodded into the receiver, recalling a decade-old argument I thought we'd buried. Maybe some wounds don't heal, just scab over until someone scratches too hard. I declined her offer to come over. Our home radiated an energy I couldn't let her touch. Matthew felt it too. At 15, he'd grown quiet, pushing peas around his plate like they held secrets. One night, his voice barely a whisper, he asked, "Is Dad mad at you?" I lied, my throat tight. "No, sweetheart, he's just tired." But his eyes, so like Greg's, searched mine, and I knew he didn't believe me. On the 5th day, I couldn't hold it in. Over the hum of the dishwasher, I asked Greg, "What made you start questioning?" He didn't look up from the sports section, his coffee mug steaming in the 62-degree of kitchen. "A few things," he said, his voice sharp, premeditated. "Doesn't matter now. The results will speak for themselves." That answer didn't sit right. Not because it was vague, Greg always kept his thoughts close, but because it felt like a blade, honed and ready. I retraced our life, searching for clues. Had someone said something? A colleague? A friend from church? Maybe someone saw Matthew's brown curls, so like Greg's, and commented. But it didn't add up. Matthew was Greg's mirror, same chin, same scowl when told no. Still, something had shifted, and I was drowning in the undertow. I opened Greg's laptop once, while he showered, the water's hiss masking my guilt. It was locked, a password I didn't know glaring back. It never used to be. I stood there, the bathroom steam curling into the hall, and felt like an intruder in my own life. Matthew's basketball sat by the door, scuffed from years of driveway games, a relic of the family we were. I wanted to call Linda, my best friend, who'd have a quip about men and their egos, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I waited, the clock ticking louder each day, the spring air heavy with rain that never fell. 9 days, not 7 like the technician promised, and every moment stretched like a shadow, dark and unyielding, until I wasn't sure what I feared more, the truth or the man who'd demanded it. The morning the DNA results arrived, my coffee sat untouched, cold as the 70-degree air in our kitchen. 9 days of waiting had carved hollows under my eyes, each tick of the clock a reminder of Greg's locked laptop and Matthew's searching gaze. I drove 15 minutes to the clinic with Greg, my nails digging into my palms, his hands steady on the wheel. The receptionist's smile was too bright, her Mr. and Mrs. Alden right this way, slicing through the fog in my head. In a sterile room, the doctor's serious face warned of news that would shift the earth. He asked if we were emotionally prepared. Greg nodded, unflinching. I couldn't speak, my voice lost somewhere in the 10-mile stretch from home. The folder opened with a sound like a clock striking midnight. Each page turned louder, deliberate. The doctor's finger traced the paper. "The probability of paternity is 0%, he said. My ears rang. Greg exhaled, muttering, "I knew it." But the doctor's eyes stayed on me, worried, not pitying. "There's something else," he continued, voice careful. "The genetic protocol shows Matthew isn't biologically related to you either, Mrs. Alden." My hands went cold, the room tilting. A void opened in my chest, not racing but gone. I whispered, "That's impossible. I gave birth to him. I nursed him." The doctor's gentle nod felt like a lifeline. "I believe you. There's a possibility of a neonatal mix-up at the hospital. You need to investigate St. Joseph's." Greg stood, red-faced. "So we've been raising a stranger's kid for 15 years?" The doctor's silence screamed louder than words. The drive home was a blur, the spring sun mocking us. As our front door clicked shut, Greg erupted. "I knew something was off, Penelope. You had one job." His words stung, venomous, as he slammed the guest bedroom door, his new fortress. I tried to speak, to say I didn't know, but my voice was ash. Alone, I opened a box of Matthew's hospital keepsakes. Wristbands, a faded birth certificate, photos of me holding him, exhausted but glowing. I knew he was mine, but doubt gnawed like a splinter. I dialed St. Joseph's, 20 miles away, my voice steady only from rehearsal. "I need to speak about a possible neonatal mix-up," I said. The receptionist paused, then transferred me to records, who transferred me to administration. A man with a flat voice sighed after 11 minutes on hold. "An incident from 2009? Our records only go back 10 years. You'd need a subpoena." I hung up, hands trembling, the word subpoena a brick wall. I grabbed my keys, the 70-degree off air heavy as I drove to St. Joseph's. The hospital's new wing gleamed, but the parking lot was unchanged, a ghost of the night. Greg rushed me in, clutching my hand. Inside, antiseptic and overbrewed coffee stung my nose. At the front desk, I demanded medical records. The young clerk hesitated, glancing back. "Without a court order, I cut her off. My child was switched here. I just need to know who else gave birth that day, she whispered. Wait here. 10 minutes later, Diana Lively, a woman in her 60s with a patient services badge, approached. I remember you, Penelope, she said softly. Room 207, emergency C-section. We almost lost you. In her office, she pulled a slim binder from a locked drawer. We were transitioning to digital in 2009. Some records are still paper. Her finger traced names. 3 other births that day. 2 boys, 1 girl. You were the only C-section. It was chaotic, understaffed. A mistake was possible. My heart pounded. The truth was close, but it felt like a cliff's edge. Diana's words echoed as I sat in St. Joseph's parking lot, the 75-degree sun dipping below the maternity wing. A mistake was possible, but proving it felt like chasing a shadow. Back home, Matthew was at school, the house silent without Greg's heavy footsteps. I sifted through the hospital box again, pausing at a photo from Matthew's birth. I was foggy from anesthesia, but a nurse in the background caught my eye, young, blonde, eyes wide, holding a swaddled baby. Her badge was crooked, unreadable. Behind her, a blurred bassinet, maybe 2. Greg's scrawl on the back read, Penelope and Matthew, January 4th, 2009. I called Diana. Was there a nurse that night? Early 20s, blonde, thin? A pause. Mara Penbrook, she said. New, first month. She quit 2 weeks later, no notice. Mara's name burned in my mind. I hired Nathan Marks, a lawyer Linda recommended, whose office is 15 miles away. Nathan, early 40s, sharp-featured, listened without blinking as I laid out the DNA results and Diana's admission. I've seen 2 cases like this, he said, flipping a notepad. It takes months for delivery logs. We'll need a private investigator. 4 days later, his investigator found Mara Jennings, her married name, in a town 120 miles north, working as a florist. I drove alone, back roads winding like my thoughts, the 75-degree of air thick with eucalyptus as I entered her shop. Pink shutters, a bell jingling, a woman with tied-back blonde hair, trimmed stems, her hands trembling when I said, Mara. Her smile dropped. I'm Penelope Alden. I gave birth at St. Joseph's, January 4th, 2009. You were there. Recognition flashed, then panic. I haven't worked in medicine in years, she stammered. I softened. Please, just hear me out. In a back room surrounded by carnations, Mara sat on an overturned crate. I was 21, my second week, she whispered. We were down 2 nurses. 2 women went into labor back to back. 1 natural, 1 emergency C-section. You. We were supposed to double-check ID bands, but the admin rushed me. The bassinets got moved for observation. I thought I had it right. My stomach twisted. Are you saying you switched them? Her eyes welled. I didn't mean to. Later I noticed a discrepancy, but my supervisor told me to stay quiet, said it'd ruin lives. I'd be liable. She quit, carrying the guilt. The other mother, Lorna, red hair, her husband in construction. That's all I remember. I left with her business card. Mara Jennings scribbled on it, my hands shaking. Nathan ran Lorna's name through databases. Lorna Blake, 24, in 2009, lived 30 miles away, gave birth to a boy, with no complications. I drove to her 2-story brick home, with wind chimes on the porch and a scooter in the driveway. Lorna answered, auburn hair in a loose bun, tired eyes wary. I'm Penelope. We may have given birth at St. Joseph's the same day, January 4th, 2009. She stared, then said, You'd better come in. Her house smelled of cinnamon. Jacob, 15, sat on the couch, earbuds in, his head tilted eerily familiar. Lorna paled as I explained the DNA results. I always wondered, she whispered. Jacob's blood type doesn't match ours. His hair darkened early, unlike our family. She'd never told her husband, Ray, who shunned uncertainty. I said, I'm not here to take anything. I just want answers. Meanwhile, Greg's absence grew darker. His credit card showed motel charges 25 miles away, meals and roses. Matthew asked, Are you and Dad fighting? I forced a smile. Something like that. The truth was close, but it felt like a storm gathering, ready to break. Lorna's confirmation of Jacob's blood type mismatch lingered like a bruise, raw and tender, as I faced the DNA results' final blow. Nathan called 3 days after I visited Lorna's cinnamon-scented home, his voice steady over the 60-degree of evening's hum. Penelope, Jacob is your biological son. Matthew is Lorna's. I sank to the living room floor, the carpet rough against my palms, and cried until my throat burned. Not for the science, but for the life I'd built on a stranger's mistake. Matthew, still at school, didn't know, and every glance at his scuffed sneakers by the door tightened the knot in my chest. Greg hadn't come home in days. His credit card trail, motel 25 miles away, roses, proof of a betrayal I couldn't ignore. I drove to the motel, the neon sign flickering in the dusk, and knocked. Greg answered, shirtless, surprised. A woman, early 30s, dark hair and a bathrobe, stood behind him, unapologetic. You're not even going to deny it, I said, my voice steel. He rubbed his neck. It didn't mean anything, I laughed, bitter. Motel stays? Flowers? She listens to you, Greg? Unlike me, who lied for 15 years? My palm stung before I knew I'd slapped him. I bled in that hospital. I loved our son. You ran because the truth scared you. He turned away, silent, and I left, the night air sharp against my skin. Lorna texted that Jacob was asking questions, so we planned a meeting. Saturday, a park 15 miles out. Neutral ground under gray 60-degree skies. I told Matthew only that he'd meet someone important, his favorite hoodie hiding his hands as we drove. Lorna and Jacob waited by a bench, Jacob's lean frame and familiar head tilt jarring. The boys locked eyes, silent, sizing up a truth they didn't yet grasp. Lorna's voice trembled. Jacob, honey, this is Penelope. She's your biological mother. The words hit like a stone in a still pond. Matthew's brow furrowed, his hand pulling from mine. Mom, what's going on? I knelt, my knees damp on the grass. Sweetheart, there was a mistake at the hospital. They gave me the wrong baby, but I didn't know. I love you. You're my son, always. His eyes widened. So, I'm not yours? Never, I whispered. Just not by blood. He stepped back. Does Dad know? Is that why he left? I nodded, voiceless. He turned to Jacob. So you're me? Jacob shrugged, lost. Neither spoke again, their faces etched with 15 years of someone else's choices. Back home, Matthew locked himself in his room, the house still as a held breath. His basketball stopped bouncing, his music silenced. I left plates of food outside his door. Some vanished, most didn't. On the third night, I found him on the porch, hoodie up, knees to his chest, the 58-degree air heavy with coming rain. Hey, I said, sitting beside him. He stared at the street. Am I going to have to live with that woman? My voice cracked. No, sweetheart, no one's taking you from me. But she's my real mom, I touched his shoulder. I'm your real mom, maybe not by blood, but in every way that counts. He wiped his nose, leaning into me, and for the first time in days, he didn't pull away. The park's silence, Greg's betrayal, and Matthew's pain were weights I carried. But his warmth against me was a spark, a promise we'd find our way. Matthew's lean against me on the porch became my anchor, a tether through the storm. The next morning, I met Nathan at his office, 15 miles away, the 68-degree air soft with spring's promise. He drafted a letter to St. Joseph's, a legal notice sharp with intent. We know, and we won't stay quiet. They'll stall, he warned, but we've got them. The hospital's response came fast. A carefully worded denial, but buried within, was an offer for confidential mediation, a crack in their armor. I nodded. We go all the way. Lorna hadn't lawyered up, but I called her. Jacob wants to meet you properly, she said. He has questions. My heart lifted. I'd like that. Jacob came over on a rainy Wednesday, his jacket dripping in my hallway. He studied the family room, the backyard where Matthew's growth chart was notched on the fence post. This is where I'd have grown up, he said, staring at a photo of me holding Matthew, summer flushed. It still can be, in some way, I replied. We talked music, school, awkward but real, and his stiff hug goodbye warmed me. Lorna invited Matthew for dinner, a 30-mile drive. I said yes, she told me, and I smiled. No pressure, just a meal. Greg's divorce papers arrived, a curt signature, no apology. I felt free, no longer small in my own home. One night I sat on the porch, the 68-degree breeze carrying laughter. Matthew and Jacob shot hoops in the driveway, not brothers, not strangers, their shots arcing under the floodlight. I'd lost a marriage, a certainty, but not my son. I gained another, and a fight for the truth. St. Joseph's would answer not today, but soon. For now the balls thud, the boys' calls, and the open sky were enough. A family redefined, circling closer, stitching wounds with every shared glance. As I sat on the porch that final night, the 68-degree enough breeze weaving through the laughter of Matthew and Jacob shooting hoops, I understood a truth that no DNA test could unravel. Family isn't stitched by blood, but by the quiet, fierce choices we make every day. At 38, I'd spent 15 years building a life with Greg, believing stability was love, only to watch it crumble under his doubts and betrayal. The hospital's mistake tore open my certainty, revealing Matthew wasn't mine by biology, yet every fever I soothed, every scraped knee I bandaged, every late-night talk cemented him as my son. Meeting Jacob, my biological child, didn't diminish Matthew, but expanded my heart's borders, teaching me that love can stretch without breaking. Greg's absence, his roses for another, showed me I'd been small in my own home, tiptoeing around his insecurities. But facing Lorna, Mara, and St. Joseph's, I found a strength I didn't know I had, not just to seek justice, but to redefine what family means. I learned that truth, however painful, is a forge, not a wrecking ball. It burned away illusions, Greg's loyalty, the hospital's infallibility, but left me with clarity. I am enough for Matthew, for Jacob, for myself. The driveway's thudding basketball, a rhythm of resilience, reminded me that mistakes, even monumental ones, can't erase the life we choose to live. I'll fight for answers, not because biology defines us, but because honesty does. That night, under the floodlight's glow, I vowed to hold my boys close, blood or not, and to never again let fear or doubt dictate my home's heartbeat.